So the overriding mindset in the West is one of materialism. This state of deprivation that they were in, or they perceived themselves to be in, amplified the importance of material resources for them, and they became all important. So obviously they took a path that only compounded their immersion in the dunya. And their entire so-called civilization developed from this particular bent in their worldview and their concept of life. I would argue that with this beginning, atheism was always going to be an inevitability in the West, because basically their whole so-called civilization originated from the belief, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about the kuffar's belief in the Quran. He said that they think that there's nothing beyond this worldly life. We live and we die, and time is the only thing that destroys us. Well, there's nowhere for that to go but atheism. From capitalism to Marxism, from so-called empiricism to even their version of Christianity. All of it reflects an absolute and exclusive belief in dunya. Yes, even Christianity. I mean, literally, you turned Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala into a physical human being walking on the earth. And you took real-world actions out of the equation of salvation, thereby foundationally separating religion and worship from actual life in this world. You know, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, meaning even with your Christianity, you're still allowed to do whatever it is you think you have to do to get by in the dunya, regardless. This became the separation of church and state. It was a natural progression, because you never thought religion should interfere with worldly affairs in the first place. You never thought it should interfere with how you actually live your life. I mean, this is what was principally behind their grievances against the church and its authority in the first place. They themselves, the church, were using religion for power and for control in the dunya and for accumulating wealth. They even used religion for worldly purposes. And then, of course, as we know, they utilized religion, utilized Christianity as a propaganda cover and a manipulation tactic for colonization. So religion was only ever a flimsy veneer laid on top of a worldly, materialistic, wealth and resource-obsessed mentality and an approach to life. Now, part of our process of psychological decolonization requires, again, the objective dismantling of the myths of Western supremacy. The myth that their mentality and their approach to the world is somehow superior to ours. Well, as they say, you will know a tree by its fruits. So whether it's the pagan period or the camouflaged atheism of the pre-Enlightenment Christian period or the modern, openly godless period of the West, the fruits are stunningly bitter and evil. This mentality has been behind colonization, chattel slavery, the feudal system, countless wars, and created societies with unprecedented concentration of wealth. There's vicious class warfare, disease, mental and emotional illness, depression, suicide, medically supervised murder, the Holocaust, dozens of genocides, the development of weaponry that can destroy the entire planet within minutes, and in fact whole economies centered on the development of these types of technologies. Imagine a whole economy powered by improving techniques of violence and slaughter. I mean, did you know that that's why you have an iPhone? That's why there's the internet. That's why there's GPS systems, mobile phone cameras, computers, Bluetooth, on and on. All of these things, all of these were developed for military purposes, purposes of warfare. They've never been innovative for the sake of humanity. They were never innovative for the sake of making our lives better, but for the sake of taking our lives better. But to them, in their materialistic mindset, their dunya-centric mentality, the fact that these killing technologies have passed into the commercial sector and everyone gets to enjoy them, so they think that that absolves them of any moral blame for their passion for murder and pillage and plunder. That's their main defense of their so-called civilization when you criticize it. They say, we have nice things. We invented cool, useful stuff. They think that they're exonerated from the contribution of misery and bloodshed and carnage that they inflicted on the world in order to achieve this material contribution. Never mind that for most of this technology, unspeakable suffering and oppression and exploitation are ongoing requirements of production. The usefulness of the technology justifies the means in their mind. They think that these material achievements legitimize them and make them superior. Never mind the human cost, the immorality, the evil through which they achieve those material accomplishments. Cultivation of intellect and the advancement of knowledge for the benefit of society is intrinsic in Islam. And this is what motivated our thinkers, that motivated our scientists and inventors and so on. There was no martial or commercial dimension to their motives. In fact, there are so many things in Islam that we cannot engage in because even if they're lucrative, they're immoral. So unlike the West, we forego the profitable in favor of the moral and the ethical, whereas they forego the moral and the ethical in favor of the profitable. It's completely different. The whole ethos of Islam, the character of Islam, is service. We literally think of ourselves as slaves. We serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We serve our families. We serve our communities. We serve our nation, our ummah, and we serve broader humanity. We neither have a sense of deprivation nor entitlement. We were taught that the best wealth is contentment, not that contentment is found in wealth. We understand and we accept that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Ar-Razaq, the provider of sustenance, and that our provision has been written for us before we even came out of the womb. And that's not fatalism. It's contentment, it's gratefulness, and it's satisfaction. You know how they talk about the so-called scarcity mindset and the abundance mindset? Well, we have neither. We have an assured mindset. We have the assurance that our provision has already been fixed for us. So we never have to compromise. We never have to humiliate ourselves for money. We never have to sell out. We never have to exploit or manipulate or cheat or pillage or subjugate other people just to get material resources. And we know that it's the same for our children. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has written their provision as well. So you don't see Muslims avoiding having children because they're afraid of how much it's going to cost. And again, look what these contrasting attitudes have wrought for their respective peoples, for them and for us. Demographically, the West is going extinct. The whole global economy is shifting in our direction precisely because your way of thinking has betrayed you, and our way of thinking has kept us the most cohesive, the biggest, and the youngest population in the world. Western so-called civilization has been just a moment, just a flash of light. Yes, it's bright, and yes, they move fast when it flashes, but we're walking in the sunlight, past, present, and future. So you shouldn't be amazed at the brief flare that the West has been, no matter how startling and how impressive it may seem. It's just a spark, a hiccup between a dark history and a dark future. It will be just another footnote in our history. And their period of domination and power in the world and influence is going to be a footnote in their history. And look at the difference. The overwhelming majority of Western history has been miserable struggle, deprivation, strife, cruelty, and barbarism. That's between their flashes of prosperity and stability. But see how they are during those flashes, even more barbarous and more violent than when they're in their periods of darkness. They committed more atrocities and more brutal savagery in modern times than they ever did in pre-modern times. Their periods of ascendancy are characterized by intensified and larger scale violence and oppression than their periods of decline. When they're doing well, relatively speaking, it does not make them better, it makes them worse. All the negative characteristics of their so-called civilization just get amplified and intensified. Meanwhile, the only time that you see the Muslim world deteriorating in its values and its religiosity and overall moral character is when it is being dominated by the West. Any moral decline in our part of the world is directly and causally connected to colonization. Even in some of our most pillaged and colonized countries, our people remain steadfast in their principles and their moral character. And our poor, our oppressed, our exploited, our victimized populations, victimized by the West, our people are still happier and more content than Westerners. More hospitable, more kind, more generous, more peaceful, more compassionate, and more rooted and more grounded and more conscientious about morality. We have to be forced to be bad. Well, they have to be forced to be good. The West causes confusion, it causes cognitive dissonance, and it causes mania. But Islam causes clarity and certainty and calm. We as a nation, as an ummah, did not originate from the pre-Islamic desert Arabs, nor from the pre-Islamic communities of the subcontinent, or the Malay archipelago, or the peoples of North Africa, and so on. Whatever any of us was before we were Muslim, when Islam came, we were born as a new nation on the earth. Or rather, we merged into the history of believers from the time of Adam alayhi salam, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of tribe, location, language, or what have you. Our belief caused us to transcend our connection to the history and the development of our respective peoples. And the nation that we became was one based upon, built upon, and developed from religious and moral beliefs, not any of our various anthropological backgrounds. So yes, the West is what it is because of how they began, and we are what we are because of how we began. And that's why we are a nation unlike any other, because we never had a primitive beginning, because our origin literally comes from the message sent down by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're a nation born from revelation. So right from the start, we began as a moral civilization. We didn't become one. We are the moral civilization, the only moral civilization that ever existed across time from Adam alayhi salam until today. There never was a time when we weren't civilized. We don't consider the Jahiliyyah period, the ignorant period of our respective people's histories, as any more relevant to who we are today than a man would consider his period of development in the womb of his mother as relevant to who he is today as an adult. For non-Muslims, for the West, they have yet to emerge. They have yet to transcend their history, and they have yet to therefore become truly civilized.